Hey guys, can you just like always let me know who it is that's in this who's in the live so that I can give you credit for being in here. So just type your name into the comments so that I can give you credit. And then once a few more people join, we'll start the conversation. Hey Kobe, who else is in here? Got Kobe. Please type your name. Hey Ivana. Hey lad. Hey Smith. You guys know this is just my live for the basic PowerPoint that I did in class for their resource, right? Not the Zoom conversation. Because at 12:30, I really would like both of you on my Zoom to discuss all current events that kids. Hey Majida. Okay, so I just want to okay, so this is the link to my Zoom that I'm hoping all of you will be a part of. Mr. James is going to be a part of that Zoom after this, right at 12:30, where we'll be discussing the riots in Syracuse, like you just brought up, Kobe. So this platform right here on the live is just going to be the discussion questions that I post for you with the Colin Kaepernick image. That's all that I'll be really diving into by myself. I want to make sure that we have other adults in this platform to talk about everything that's going on current event wise with more representation. So again, we're just going to talk about the questions from Canvas in here. We're not going to be talking about the stuff that's going on in Syracuse right now. Everyone understand that? We're good. So if you want and you feel like you really need to have that conversation, and I feel like everyone should desire to have that conversation, it'll be in the Zoom after this. This is just going to be the questions that go with the Colin Kaepernick image that I posted on Canvas. So I'm going to go to those questions and let's see here. So it was labeled Civil Rights Today, and I had, hey Newsom, I had you answer those 5 questions. So that's what we're focusing on in this live, like I said, and then after I put the Zoom information and I'll put it in at the end of this meeting as well for you to join our Zoom afterward to talk about everything else, any questions that you have. So if you want to just make note of anything that you know are like your burning questions that you have, just write them down somewhere so that you have them for the Zoom after this, so that you can ask a bunch of different teachers are going to be in the Zoom, and they'll be there for you to have for any questions that you have about what's going on currently in Syracuse, in New York State, in the world, in the United States, even in the world. I mean, Italy is even protesting over what happened. So again, we're going to focus on the questions. So, do you agree with the quote? So the quote is the first question. The quote says, when civility leads to death, revolting is the only logical reaction. So I made a PowerPoint slide, and the learning target that goes with this, I can have a conversation about injustices happening in the United States right now and relate them to injustices that happened in the past. So by the end of the week, we're going to be able to do that. We're going to talk about Malcolm X more specifically on Thursday, and I'll have that resource up for you by the end of the day today. So again, you'll have Thursday's assignment up by the end of the day today. I've already created the live link that will go with it. So by the end of this week, you should be able to have a conversation about injustices happening in the United States right now and relate them to the injustices that happened in the past. So that is our learning target. Our quote, I wish I could post this in here, but I will just post the vocab. And then you guys can let me know if you agree or not with the quote. I would like you to come up with like, okay, I agree because, or I disagree because. So when civility leads to death, revolting is the only logical reaction. So that quote right there, I'd like to know if you agree or you disagree with it. That is the first question that I'm posing. Do you agree that when civility leads to death, revolting is the only logical reaction? So I've defined logical, clear, sound reasoning. So you have a reason behind it. It's logical. It's not just like, oh, because I like spaghetti, something random. Like, it's logical. It's mathematical. You can formulate it. You can spell it out. Everyone can understand why you're doing what you're doing. Civility, formal politeness and courtesy and behavior. So when people are being polite and doing the right thing, and then injustice still happens, and that injustice is death, is it logical then to revolt? That's the question at hand. That's what the quote is saying, that it is. So do you believe that it is logical to revolt when people are doing the right thing and still die? So I have an answer, or I had an answer from Majida, but she just retracted it. So if people are having these, like, they're doing the right thing, you know, they're not resisting arrest, they're doing the right thing, and death still happens, does that mean that they have the right to revolt? And is that revolt logical? That's what Colin Kaepernick is saying. He is the one who wrote the quote, so he obviously agrees that yes, you need to revolt when things like that happen. So I have Majida as a yes. She agrees with Colin Kaepernick. Anyone else have their own opinion? Do you agree or disagree with Colin Kaepernick? A revolt is a rebellion. So when you're rebelling against something, you are fighting against it. So a rebellion most likely is seen as violent, but it's not always violent. It can be when you rebel against something, you just don't agree with it. So you're protesting against something. Please don't make it just me and Majida in here. I know that some of you don't like to type in the live because the comments are there forever, but you really just have to tell me whether or not you agree with the quote. You don't have to explain. I just want to see how many people think that basically what you're saying is protests were necessary because of George Floyd's death? Do you believe that protests needed to happen after George Floyd died or was murdered? Colby, what do you think? Thank you, Ms. Newsom. This is a heavy topic. I mean, I'm just grazing it in this live, and then I want you to be thinking about all the things that are coming into your head while we talk about this, like just this basic layer. And then in the Zoom, really use that as your platform to ask these deep questions. Okay? So again, I just want, whether or not you agree with the quote, you don't have to go into a deep explanation. Thank you, Wolfpack. Okay, so the second question, I'm going to move on because I can see people are uncomfortable answering that question. And you'll still have to answer it to me privately on Canvas, but you don't have to answer it here on YouTube. Is a revolt / a riot logical? Oh, hey, Rocio. So a revolt versus a riot. I'm going to define revolt. We have that already, a rise in rebellion. A riot. So one is a little bit more specific than the other. A revolt is just a rise or in rebellion. So you're standing up against something you don't believe in. A riot is a violent disturbance of peace by a crowd. So a riot is when possibly something has happened that triggers other protesters to then make it a bit more violent. So a violent disturbance of the peace by a crowd. So there could be a peaceful protest going on, something happens, it leads to a riot, so some kind of violent act. We definitely have seen that across the United States. A lot of violent disturbance, a lot of riots have been popping up in all major cities as well as smaller cities in the United States. So riots would be the looting, burning trash cans, honestly throwing back tear gas, anything like that. When it's no longer peaceful and people are just when you're not chanting with your sign any longer, you're not marching peacefully, you have gone kind of sidetracked and you've decided that's not working, we need to do more. And dependent on that, a riot could be something where you're like, okay, we needed to set that trash can on fire, or we needed to throw back that. So on Canvas, I said it's logical because silent doesn't do anything. There's no doubt that more Black people will die after George. Okay, that's good. That's a good response. So you can't just stay silent and expect change. Exactly. It depends on how loud you want to be, because a riot, you're pretty loud when you're taking part in a riot. There's no way to ignore a riot. It's hard to ignore a peaceful protest, but it's almost impossible to ignore a riot, especially if looting's happening, if people are burning down businesses. That kind of goes into a different realm of attention in order to cause change, which sometimes those things happen and it leads to bigger changes that need to happen. Sometimes it doesn't. It all depends on how many people are doing it, how many people are supporting it, how much change needs to happen. So again, we have this difference between revolt and riot. The question I posed was, is it logical? So, like Majida said, it is logical to revolt when bad things happen. Now, is it logical to riot when you want a change? That's the question you have to answer yourself. A riot, a little bit more extreme, can cause people to die, dependent on how violent the riot gets. So you have to think about that when you're thinking about whether or not it is logical when you answer that question. But again, any of these deeper questions that you have as we talk about just basic vocab words and coming up with these questions, again, just write them down so that you have them ready for the Zoom. We're going to be doing that in less than like 10 minutes. So I'm going to move on to the next question. Again, any major questions that you have about Syracuse specifically or what's going on in the United States specifically, please write them down so that you can ask a whole panel of teachers in the Zoom meeting. Okay, so next question. Who is George Floyd? So I gave you information on your slide about who George Floyd was. I'm going to copy and paste a quote from an article of how he was described. Revolts, I would say historically, revolts are not necessarily violent. I would say that sometimes the context of that makes it seem like it's violent, but the definition of a revolt is not, it's a revolution. So revolutions can be violent. It's just a major change that's trying to happen. So the context sometimes makes it seem like it is violent, but the riot word is the violent. Like that's what makes it violent. A revolt is just a shortening of a rebellion, or like when we talk about Nat Turner's rebellion, things like that, usually there's a context with it that it's violent. But rebellion, I guess, would mean a little bit more violent. But again, it's not defined that way. When people feel they are not heard or listened to, they'll riot to get attention. Exactly, Ms. Newsom. I don't know why my thing's getting all fuzzy. Okay, so you're welcome, Miss Haymore. So who was George Floyd? That's what I was asking. I just gave you a quote. People who knew the man killed in a violent police incident say he was cheerful, gentle giant who was laid off when Minnesota shut down. So he was part of working for a restaurant, unemployed due to COVID-19. Like a lot of us are unemployed, or at least losing out on some other work that we have. Like most people have at least 2 jobs, so we're not getting our full income right now. Accused of writing a false check, and that led to the extreme violence from the police officer. So again, I gave you a quote of how people who knew him saw him. Hey, D'Amico. But how has he been viewed on social media? How do you see him? Okay, so resisting, do you mean resisting arrest? Jalen, is that what you mean, resisting arrest? Once it got to that point, there's like skewed reports as to whether or not he was resisting arrest. I've seen articles where it says that he has, and articles where it says that he wasn't doing that. But towards the end, the final, that 8-minute time period where there's a knee on his neck, it's it's not resisting any longer. You have someone who's crying out for their life. I'm sure you've seen or heard some of the things on social media that he was saying. 46-year-old unarmed Black man who was known as being a gentle giant that died because he was kneeled on the neck by a Minneapolis police officer for more than 8 minutes. Exactly. Yeah, we're doing the Zoom at 12:30. So I'm just going through the basic 5 questions that I had, and then, yeah, he kept saying, "I can't breathe." That's why peaceful protesters have been chanting that. So, D'Amico, yes, we will be going live or on Zoom. I'll be reposting the Zoom link once we get through the 5 questions here, and you'll have other teacher support to answer any questions you have about what's going on right now. Who is Colin Kaepernick? So we've talked a lot about Colin Kaepernick in my class last year and this year. He's been part of my content. We've talked about lots of different things that he's done in the slides that I made you. I gave you like specific quotes, kind of started with him being like a forefront for racial justice. So, of course, it's going to be too long to post in the comments. I'm not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses Black people and people of color, Kaepernick told the NFL media after Friday's game. To me, it's bigger than football. And it would be selfish on my part to look the other way. There are bodies in the street and people getting paid leave and getting away with murder. So again, way back when Colin Kaepernick was playing football for San Francisco and he took a knee and everyone had a problem with it, even though it was peaceful protest. They said that it was un-American, unpatriotic. The reasoning why he was doing that was due to the national anthem having extremely racist lyrics in it. Whether or not the whole national anthem was sung, like is sung each time, it's still the historical background connected to the national anthem is extremely racist. And we've dived into that in class before. We've looked at the lyrics, we've seen the racist tone in the lyrics, talking about wanting slavery to come back and things like that, and yet that's our national anthem. So again, that's why he took his knee and kind of started this real, I guess, like national presence to protesting police officers and police brutality. So he connected the national anthem to racism and then to racism in police forces and police brutality, which a lot of people didn't understand. And a lot of ignorant people made it seem like he should no longer play football, and anyone that took a knee was unpatriotic. And now it's kind of gotten to the point where that's accepted protest, but now we're not accepting the rioting. So it's all step by step kind of thing where we talked about Colin Kaepernick. Some people in class decided that they didn't support what he was doing. We had a debate over this, I remember, in 7th grade. But again, that's kind of where we start the platform with Colin Kaepernick. And then we continue talking about him when he believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything, his Nike campaign. So we talked about that in class and how people were protesting Nike by burning their shoes because they didn't believe that he should be a spokesperson for them. And that was kind of his next step in trying to create a platform for injustice. So believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. So obviously there's some connection to being a pro football player. He believed in drawing attention to police brutality to the point of losing out on being a pro football player because that was more important to him. He believed in it so much that he'll sacrifice his career in order to draw attention to police brutality. And then most recently, he was quoted just trying to give you the resource too. It won't let me. In fighting for liberation, there's always retaliation. We must protect our freedom fighters. So again, already? Okay, I'll be out there in a second. Sorry, my pool people came. They're not supposed to be here until late afternoon, so I'm gonna deal with them in a second. But again, just background on Colin Kaepernick so that I wasn't just giving you a quote from someone that we hadn't talked about. I wanted to make sure that you all had background on him and could really speak about who he was as a person and why a quote coming from him means so much. So again, like I said, I just wanted to go over the 5 basic questions with you on this live, and then we'll start the Zoom with talking about current events with all of the other teachers that wanted to join in on that. So I'm going to repost the Zoom link. And again, I'm sorry that this is rushed, but I have to deal with the people that are at my house right now. So there's the Zoom link. And one of the teachers that's in here, do you mind starting the Zoom conversation? Does anyone feel comfortable doing that since I have to go talk to my pool people? Okay, so again, I've answered the 5 questions. If you guys just want to come over. I'm going to end the stream. Thank you for all of your help today.